Ethan Carter was the kind of man who believed that money could buy anything: respect, power, even love. As the CEO of Carter Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, he had spent his entire life climbing to the top. He wore designer suits, drove the most expensive cars, and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. His life was a picture of luxury, but there was one thing he couldn't understand: why his wife, Emma, still cared about her poor family. Emma had grown up in a small town, in a modest home where love mattered more than money. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, were hard-working but struggled financially. Her father was a retired mechanic, and her mother ran a small bakery that barely made ends meet. They had raised her with kindness and values, something Ethan never truly appreciated. From the moment they married, Ethan made it clear that he didn't respect her family. "Why do you even visit them?" he would say, shaking his head as Emma packed gifts for her parents. "They're nothing but a burden. You have everything now. You don't need to associate with people who have nothing." Emma's heart broke every time he spoke that way. She had fallen in love with Ethan for who he was behind closed doors, the charming, intelligent man who had once made her feel special. But with time, wealth had changed him. He had become arrogant, condescending, and completely blind to the way he hurt her. Whenever they had dinner with her family, Ethan would make snide remarks. "Oh, so we're having this again? Reminds me of when I was in college and had no money." He would smirk, pushing his plate aside. Or worse, when her father shared stories about his past as a mechanic, Ethan would roll his eyes. "Fixing old cars? That must have been so fulfilling," he would say, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Emma's parents never reacted. They were kind, patient people who only wanted their daughter to be happy. But Emma saw the pain in their eyes. It killed her inside. One evening, after yet another family dinner where Ethan had mocked her father for still working at the local garage, Emma finally confronted him. "Why do you always have to be so cruel?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. Ethan scoffed. "I'm just telling the truth. You should be grateful you don't live like them anymore." That night, Emma cried herself to sleep. But Ethan's world was about to be shaken in a way he never expected. The next morning, he walked into his office, ready for another day of running his empire. But as soon as he stepped in, his assistant greeted him nervously. "Sir, the new chairman wants to see you." "Immediately." Ethan frowned. New chairman? That was impossible. He was the CEO. No one outranked him except the owner of the company. And the owner had never been involved in day-to-day operations, until now. Ethan straightened his tie and walked into the boardroom, where a tall, distinguished man stood by the window, looking out over the city. As the man turned, Ethan's blood ran cold. It was Emma's father, Mr. Dawson. The same man he had insulted, mocked, and looked down upon for years. Ethan's mouth went dry. "Mr. Dawson? What are you doing here?" Mr. Dawson smiled. "I suppose you didn't do your research, Ethan." He walked toward the head of the table and sat down. Carter Enterprises was acquired last week by a silent investor. That investor was me. Ethan's world tilted. Emma's father was the new owner of his company. His poor, insignificant father-in-law was now the most powerful man in the room. Mr. Dawson leaned forward. "You never thought much of me, did you, Ethan? You always assumed I was just some small-town mechanic. But what you failed to realize is that I spent years building an empire in the auto industry. The very same industry that supplies parts to half the companies your business depends on." Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped the table. This couldn't be happening. "From today onwards," Mr. Dawson continued, "I will be making some changes. Starting with the leadership. You, Ethan, will no longer be CEO." Ethan's heart pounded. "You can't do this." "Oh, I can," Mr. Dawson said calmly. "You see, Ethan, I've watched you for years. I've watched how you treated my daughter. How you disrespected my family. You think wealth makes you superior? It doesn't. Character does." Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. Emma entered the room then, standing beside her father. Her expression was unreadable. "Emma, please," Ethan begged, his voice cracking. "You know I love you." She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Love isn't just words, Ethan. It's actions. And your actions have told me everything I need to know. Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. He had spent years believing that his wealth made him untouchable, that Emma's family was beneath him. But now, he had lost everything. Mr. Dawson stood. Security will escort you out. As Ethan was led away, he realized that he had been the poor one all along. Not financially, but in spirit, in kindness, in humility. Mansion driveway. Night. A sleek black car pulls into the grand driveway of the Carter estate. The mansion looms in the background, a symbol of wealth and success. Ethan Carter, mid-40s, handsome and sharply dressed, steps out. He adjusts his expensive cufflinks, exuding confidence. His wife, Emma Carter, elegant but modest, follows him hesitantly. Ethan. You know, Emma, every time we visit your family, I wonder why you still bother. You have everything here. Why surround yourself with people who have nothing? Emma's jaw tightens, but she says nothing. She's used to his words, but that doesn't make them hurt any less. Int. Modest family home. Night. Emma's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, welcome them inside. The home is warm and inviting, though far from luxurious. The contrast between the two worlds is evident. Emma smiles warmly at her parents, who embrace her tightly. Ethan, however, barely acknowledges them, eyeing the simple surroundings with disdain. At the dinner table, everyone eats heartily, everyone except Ethan, who pushes his plate aside. Ethan. No offense, but this reminds me of the food I ate in college when I was broke. A silence falls over the table. Emma glares at Ethan, her patience wearing thin. Mr. Dawson simply sighs and continues eating, refusing to engage. Mrs. Dawson looks hurt but tries to hide it. Mrs. Dawson. We're grateful for what we have, Ethan. Family is what matters. Ethan. That's easy to say when you don't have to work 16-hour days to maintain a lifestyle worth living. Emma's fists clench under the table. She knows Ethan has always been arrogant, but this time he has gone too far. EXT Carter Enterprises. Day. Ethan walks into his office, confident as ever. His assistant, Lucas, greets him with urgency. Lucas. Sir, the new owner wants to meet you right away. Ethan. Owner? What owner? I'm the CEO. Lucas swallows hard. He doesn't know how to break the news. Ethan, irritated, marches into the boardroom. Int. Boardroom. Day. A tall, dignified man stands by the window. Ethan freezes as he recognizes the figure. Mr. Dawson turns, his expression calm but firm. Ethan. You. What are you doing here? Mr. Dawson. I acquired the majority shares in Carter Enterprises last week. I own the company now. Ethan stares, unable to process the words. The man he had belittled for years is now his boss. Mr. Dawson. Sit down, Ethan. We have things to discuss. Ethan hesitates, then slowly takes a seat. Sweat beads on his forehead. Mr. Dawson. You see, Ethan, you never bothered to ask about my past. You assumed I was just a simple mechanic. But I built an empire in the auto industry, one that now controls the supply chain for your company. Ethan's jaw clenches. Mr. Dawson. And from today, I'm making changes. Starting with you. Ethan. You can't fire me. I built this company. Mr. Dawson. You built a business. But you lost sight of what truly matters. Leadership isn't just about money, Ethan. It's about people. Ethan swallows hard. He looks at Emma, who stands beside her father. Her expression is unreadable. Ethan. Emma, please, tell him he can't do this. Emma meets his gaze, her voice steady. Emma. I don't have to, Ethan. Actions speak louder than words. And your actions, they told me everything I needed to know. Ethan's world shatters. Security enters, ready to escort him out. As he rises, he realizes something for the first time. He had spent years mocking Emma's family, believing they were beneath him. But in the end, they were the ones who had everything. And he was the one left with nothing.